Do they ever return to possess the living? This question was used heavily in promotional material for Jack Clayton's 1961 Gothic romantic thriller, The Innocents. The answer, at least according to the trailers, is yes. As a result, audiences would walk into theaters expecting a story about a young woman in a large, unfamiliar house struggling to protect two young orphans from ghostly possession while a handsome and mysterious love interest stalks the shadows. I would argue that the marketing team made a concerted effort to sell The Innocents this way, as a fairly textbook Gothic romance, based on how perfectly it plays into really selling the film's ironic theme. Unlike the overly expositional trailers typical of movies today, promotional material for The Innocents plays on moviegoers' pre-established understanding of the genre and tells a whole different story than what the film has in store. This is the genius of The Innocents and Jack Clayton's direction thereof. The structure of a Gothic romance, from expected plot lines and tropes to genre-defining lighting codes, is used to enhance the irony of the film and deepen the impact of the advertised mind-stunning end. Before I go any further, I would highly recommend pausing this video and enjoying The Innocents in its entirety if you haven't seen it already. But if it's been a while or you don't plan on watching the film anyway, I'll give a quick summary. The Innocents opens with the protagonist, Miss Giddens, played by Deborah Kerr, surrounded by total darkness, crying and clasping her hands while nightingales sing and her disembodied voice can be heard saying,
"All I want to do is save the children, not destroy them."
Like awakening from a bad dream, the screen then blurs and fades to a brightly lit scene where Miss Giddens is being interviewed for a governess position to care for two young orphans left in the custody of their wealthy uncle, played by Michael Redgrave. During the interview, Miss Giddens learns that the position had opened up due to the previous governess's recent and untimely death at the uncle's isolated country manor in the fictional English town of Bly, based on real-life County Essex.
She died. Well, it's just when I thought I'd got the whole situation settled and everything running smoothly, the confounded woman died.
Though visibly perturbed by the revelation, she accepts the job and excitedly sets off for the country estate. Upon her arrival, Miss Giddens meets Flora, played by Pamela Franklin, and the housekeeper, Mrs. Gross, played by Meg Jenkins. Though Flora's brother, Miles, played by Martin Stevens, isn't present at first, he arrives after only a few days, having been expelled from boarding school for bad behavior. His unexpected arrival worries Miss Giddens at first, but she's soon beyond smitten with the young boy as he charms her with his uncharacteristically mature mannerisms and demeanor.
"I think you're far too pretty to be a governess."
The governess finds herself powerfully drawn to Miles and simultaneously begins having encounters with the spirit of a handsome yet terrifying man who stalks the towers, grounds, and halls of Bly Manor after finding his portrait in the attic. Spooked by the ghostly apparition and ashamed of her attraction to a boy no more than 11 years old, Miss Giddens confronts Mrs. Gross and presses her for answers. Though the housekeeper denies having seen or heard anything supernatural, she reveals that the man who Miss Giddens has seen matches the description of the estate's previous valet, Peter Quint, played by Peter Wingard, who had been in an intense, passionate relationship with the last governess and had died on the manor's front steps shortly preceding his lover's death. It then comes to light that Quint had been very close with and something of a role model to young Miles. Failing to understand that the boy had learned his charm from this father figure, she convinces herself that Quint's spirit is attempting to possess Miles instead, and that she must intervene in order to save him, effectively excusing and absolving herself of guilt for her unnatural attraction to him. Fully convinced of her newly fabricated narrative of ghostly possession, Miss Giddens sends Flora, Mrs. Gross, and the rest of the staff away from the property so she can confront Miles directly, in effect trying to exorcise the ghost of Peter Quint from him. After making some unquestionably inappropriate advances, which Miles dodges before running away calling her a hussy, Miss Giddens argues with the boy in the conservatory, then chases him out into the garden where she eventually catches him. The governess demands that Miles say the name of the man he's been meeting, forcing Miles into a confused panic before he drops to the ground.
"He's here! For the last time, he's here! No, he's here! He's here, and you must say his name!"
Where, you devil? Where?
Believing her exorcism a success, Miss Giddens rushes to Miles' side only to discover that he's dead. She lets out a painful cry and kisses Miles's lifeless body passionately on the lips before looking up to the heavens as the scene fades to black. The Innocents ends with a familiar shot of Miss Giddens' praying hands and the sounds of mocking nightingale song, mirroring the very start of the film. Now that we're all caught up on The Innocents and how the plot of the actual film differs from the way it was advertised, I'd like to get into why the structure of the film itself helps to enhance the irony found throughout, starting with a look at the genre of Gothic romance. Gothic romance is a subgenre of Gothic film. As such, films that fall into this category are usually dark, tonally paranoid thrillers featuring vulnerable female leads in their navigation of a secretive and potentially dangerous romance. The Innocents follows this structure relatively closely. Miss Giddens is canonically young and naive, the daughter of a pastor who finds herself dangerously attracted to someone she can't have, living in a shadowy house full of ghosts and secrets while trying to navigate her paranoia and confusion. Typically, we might expect to see the protagonist portrayed as a net good force and character. The genre dictates that the audience expects Miss Giddens will save the children, though likely succumbing to the seductive, haunting spirit along the way. However, this is where The Innocents is different, and Jack Clayton uses the accepted structure of the genre to enhance the irony of the film by revealing the expected victim to be the real threat. Miss Giddens understands that her attraction to Miles is unacceptable. She's naive, but not stupid or totally amoral. Panicked and struggling to find a solution to her problem, she clings to the idea that the boy is being possessed by Quint and that it's to he whom she's truly attracted. This illogical notion, paired with Miss Giddens' underlying mental illness, more on that later, lays the groundwork for the ironic twist ending where Miles dies and the ghost of Quint is revealed to be a product of the governess's paranoid mind. The Innocents is a somewhat atypical Gothic romance in this way. Its manipulation of the genre's expected structure by having the female lead fill the roles of both protagonist and antagonist plays a large part in enhancing the depth of the film's irony in the end. Another way the structure of Gothic romance contributes to the ironic theme of The Innocents is through Jack Clayton's exploitation of lighting codes that are part and parcel of the genre itself. Dark, confining shadows and dramatic lighting are defining visual features of the Gothic genre and consequently apply equally to the subgenre of Gothic romance. However, the use of lighting isn't limited to conforming to a stylistic set of parameters. Coded lighting is often used in these types of films to communicate information to the viewer that is not otherwise explicitly stated, and The Innocents is no exception. In the film, this coded lighting can be observed in action when Miss Giddens is playing hide-and-seek with the children immediately following her discovery of a photograph of Peter Quint in the attic. The lighting feels bright and playful as she runs around the house searching for a good hiding place, eventually slipping in behind some floor-to-ceiling curtains. However, when she turns to look out the window behind her, the lighting dims to near total darkness and her eyes widen in terror as Quint walks right up to the glass. Then, a few moments after the apparition retreats back into the shadows, the lighting brightens once again. To understand the deeper meaning of this shift in lighting, it's important to first acknowledge that Miss Giddens is not truly seeing ghosts. She is mentally ill, likely a schizophrenic, and suffering from severe paranoid delusions. As Miles says in his final moments alive, she is insane.
You're insane! You're insane! His name, Miles! You are insane! You're insane!
As a result, Miss Giddens is completely incapable of distinguishing between the products of her imagination and reality. Understanding that Miss Giddens is unknowingly presenting with symptoms of undiagnosed schizophrenia, it's reasonable to conclude that the shifts in lighting before and after she encounters Quint are likely indicative of her slipping into and back out of an intense state of psychosis. This telling trick of coded lighting contributes to the paranoid tone of The Innocents by giving audiences a visual representation of what's happening in the governess's head and to her psyche. For the same reason, the lighting in this scene is coded for a dramatically ironic effect. We see Miss Giddens as breaking mentally, slowly losing her grip on reality as her fear and paranoia wrestle her subconscious for control of her rationale long before she loses it entirely. While specific genre codes like the lighting code I just explored occasionally appear throughout The Innocents, more general filming techniques are also used to convey deeper meaning to media-literate audiences. Details like camera placement for shot angles, focal depth, and lighting can all carry significant meaning, enhancing the depth of a shot, scene, or film through their subtle addition of information. An excellent example from The Innocents is when the ghost of Peter Quint appears in the window behind Miles while he and Miss Giddens argue in the Manor's conservatory. Miles is in a dominant position to his governess here. His face is shot close up from a slightly low angle, yet is out of focus and obscured by shadows. This is seemingly from Miss Giddens' perspective. The close-up camera and low angle tell us that what he has to say is important and that we, and Miss Giddens, should be paying close attention to his words. However, the camera remains focused on the window behind him and the comparably well-lit face of Peter Quint therein, who's placed even higher in the frame than Miles himself. This scene perfectly illustrates the innocent's tone of paranoia and strongly bolsters its overarching ironic theme by showing us exactly what Miss Giddens sees. Miles is symbolic of the truth in this particular scene. Blurring and obscuring his face from Miss Giddens' perspective tells us that she's almost completely ignoring him as her paranoid mind is actively muddying her perception of reality. Quint's position above Miles indicates the power of his influence over both living characters in the scene. Though Miles isn't possessed, he does act as the conduit for Quint's energy through his attitude and language. Peter Quint's influence on Miles is indeed the most likely reason that Miss Giddens is attracted to the young boy in the first place, so his high position, though entirely imagined by Miss Giddens, is ironically appropriate. In a roundabout way, Miss Giddens understands why she's attracted to Miles, but her paranoia and the psychosomatic symptoms she is experiencing stop her from being capable of acting appropriately to rationalize or diffuse the situation effectively. The struggle between Miss Giddens' understanding of any given situation and her innate inability to differentiate between manifestations of her paranoia and reality is one of the main ironic themes of The Innocents, and Jack Clayton masterfully communicates this through the shot angles, composition, and carefully orchestrated lighting in this scene. I could honestly spend hours talking about The Innocents, but I think I've covered enough to make my point in this presentation. In my opinion, everything from the film's trailers and techniques used while filming down to the very structure of the genre are used strategically to enhance the irony of this classic Gothic romance. Subtle clues hinting at Miss Giddens' compromised perception of reality are sprinkled in abundance throughout the film, and this is part of the genius of Jack Clayton's direction. So clever are these genre conventions and filming techniques used that The Innocents retains its irony regardless of how many times you watch it by shifting the viewer's perception. On first watch, the film will present to all but the most perceptive and media literate as situationally ironic, since most audiences will not expect Miss Giddens to be the real threat to the children until they are shocked by Miles's tragic death at her hand. However, watching The Innocents a second time allows one to experience the film through the lens of dramatic irony, as evidence of Miss Giddens' insanity seems to be woven into nearly every scene, and more hints can be found on every subsequent viewing. Multiple viewings of The Innocents also allows the paranoid tone of the film to be enhanced exponentially, since we know for a fact that the governess is delusional and can truly appreciate the way she is slowly losing her grip on reality as time passes. Regardless of how you experience The Innocents, it's without question that the film is shocking and supremely beautiful, the core elements of the genre being employed for both visual spectacle and storytelling richness. In spite of what its trailers wanted audiences to think walking into theaters back in 1961, The Innocents makes its case clear. But what do you think? Do they ever return to possess the living?